Welcome back to Living the Questions podcast. I really sat with this today and said, what question am I living into right now? Which is interesting because I I think at any given moment I'm living into probably more questions than I could even count. And when I was sitting with it, I feel like this is a this is a season of my life where I am living as presently as I can remember living, and it's it's making it interesting to decipher what those questions are that I'm living into. They're just ever present. They are things that I'm in practice with, and I think I'm realizing that I'm seeing them less as questions I'm asking, and I really feel the living into them. So it took me a while to really sit with what is the question I'm diving into today that I'm living into. And I think it will be a little bit of a parse out today. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to be in a season where things feel a little less raw, a little more um, it feels like a season of integration. It feels like a season of, yeah, continued exploration, continued curiosity. And yeah, it just feels really like I'm embodying things. It feels like I'm putting what I've learned, the depths of healing, the depths of that journey into the descent, as my friend so beautifully put it, and taking the wisdom from that time period and what life I've created from that, who I've discovered myself more to be through that, and living life out with that wisdom as that person in that life, and going after, what is that life? What is the life I want to be living with that wisdom now in the mix, and integrating that to create the life that I want to, yeah, to not just get to know myself better. I feel like that was part of that descent process, was getting to know myself really well, was reconnecting to myself and all the different parts of myself, all the different ages of myself, all the different internal family systems within me. And I feel like, yeah, I re-related, reconnected, re-related, potentially even related for the first time to some of these parts. And now it feels like I'm getting to grow in those relationships. And these are all relationships within me. And they all are really important for me to continue to know more of who I am as a whole, um, to be able to be in relationship to anything or anyone in this world. Those relationships have been within myself. All these parts of me have been so important, so supportive. That healing process has allowed me to actually feel really grounded, where before I I really felt disconnected. There's no other word for it. I felt like I felt anxious, or so terrified I was shut down, or I needed to, like, really restless. I needed to do something. These are all nervous system responses. And I was disconnected from myself, disconnected from the moment, disconnected from another, potentially, depending on what the circumstance was. And I think it's really fun now to see that even though I'll still get nervous and have anxiety and, yeah, have different moments that feel uncomfortable or tension is a part of it, I feel the groundedness that didn't exist before, or that just wasn't within my reach before, or just wasn't a practiced skill that I even knew that I had within me or that was accessible to me. I don't think that it really was before because I had not practiced it or been modeled it or known it. And it's really, really amazing to feel. I don't love feeling anxious. I don't think anyone enjoys that. And also, I am thinking in this moment about the the beauty of like excitement and anxiousness are actually like two sides of the same coin. And I like feeling excited. I don't love feeling anxious. And since doing somatic work and learning more internal parts of myself, I have come to have one of my favorite relationships with myself is actually with my anxiety. I feel like I I can't even believe I'm actually saying that out loud. And I'm like holding myself as I say that because that's not a negative thing to have said. It's just that it was a hard relationship prior to that. It was a non-existent relationship prior to that. It was just taking over. And that sweet, sweet part of me, this anxious part of me, feels like a very, very, very young, young part of me. And her and I have been on a big, 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 big journey together, and we continue to be. And the rebuild of trust together has been everything, has been so necessary, has been what allows me to, yeah, be more aligned with my own self. And when I say that, it's beyond knowing what alignment is in our life, because I think I thought of that in different ways before, like, oh, this feels aligned, this work feels aligned, this choice feels aligned, this place feels aligned, this person feels aligned. All of these things are alignment. But when I'm saying it now, I'm talking about myself, like all of the parts of me are aligned, um, as if they're like all stacked up in like the way that, when when we're talking about like good posture or something like that, um, how the way that your body stacks when it actually is in its proper posture. Not that there is like a good, quote unquote, or proper way for myself to align. I think of it more as alignment is that feeling of like clicking in. That moment when like something happens and you're like, oh, and it like clicks for you and you're like, yes, that. Um, or like putting in like a puzzle piece or something that you're just like, oh, it's like all forming, it all makes sense to me. Um, I feel like that it's not a stagnant click in, it doesn't just stay that way, but it's an alignment that helps me understand more of myself as a whole person with all the different variations of me, with all the different ages of me, with all the different complexities and human tendencies of mine. Yeah, all the beautiful and challenging pieces within me. Um, yeah, it's really fascinating what alignment looks like then when you look at it that way, or when I've looked at it that way. So I've really loved this getting to know myself, this relationship, re-relating within my own self and building trust that way. And I really have felt much more grounded. So living into that question has been what the entire first season was about and continues to be, of this podcast, is that relationship to self. I started this podcast really with the desire to build that trust, to build that connection with not only myself, with others, and definitely with myself, wanting to embrace my own voice, wanting to not be afraid to be more of me or put myself out there or express, to rid the feeling of needing to have the perfect words. I'm showing up today with no agenda except for figuring out what living into the questions looks like for me in this current time period and sharing that, because you never know what sharing that actually will offer. What medicine does that have to offer that I don't even know? How will that land with someone else? How will that land for me, even as I'm sharing this right now? I don't know. And I don't want to take those moments away because I feel like they might not be enough or there's not inherent value, quote unquote, in them. Um, I think that I think that that's a bit of what I'm living into is shedding these limiting pieces, these blockages of not, yeah, these blockages that keep me from learning more of who I am or connecting more to myself and to others, to the world around me. And yeah, I think a lot of the time we think we need to be different than what we are, who we are. I think we are nervous to express more of what is true for us. We're nervous to be congruent. We're nervous to be where we are. We want to be somewhere else. We want to be, you know, we want to already be at the end of the lesson. We already want to know and look back on things in a way that actually feels like, okay, this was tough, but here I am now and I've learned all this stuff. And I think, and I might have mentioned this in an episode before, but it always makes me think of this John Mayer lyric that he talks about, you know, and I'm obviously not going to remember it now because I'm wanting to remember it now. But when I don't need to remember it, I remember it. So I'll swing back around to that one. But it more or less is him talking about that, him talking about, wanting to get to the point of looking back and saying, this is the way that it used to be. Um, but then he says, there's no substitute for time. So I think that it's interesting that there's an like an innate human desire to want to collapse a timeline, to want to speed things up, to want to feel like, here's the wisdom, I've already learned it, to want to rush that discomfort of that in between stage, that, yeah, that transition from caterpillar to butterfly stage, if you will. That one keeps coming up over and over and over for me, which is that descent process. And I will say, having been in my own personal descent process over the course of the last year plus, um, it's 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 terrible. I'm not going to sugarcoat how that felt. It's terrible, and I do feel a bit today on not the other side, but I feel like I'm in a different part of that same journey. And I did not feel like I was going to get there. And I'm also not fooling myself that this is like the end of that journey. And now I have all this wisdom and I won't go through a descent again or won't have challenges in this season of life. I may. And I also really, or no, I won't just may, I will. And I also don't want to feel like, um, yeah, have myself believe that it all has to be challenge. I want to be able to actually be here in this moment and savor this integration period that actually feels so rich in its own way, to feel like this groundedness feels earned, but not in a way where I feel like I needed to get fully beat up in order to arrive at this point and really earn it. It feels like I I don't know how to describe earned in that way. It feels like it was a hard road and the wisdom was was earned because I showed up for the hard. I didn't avoid it. I didn't bypass it. Yeah, I didn't look away from the hardest parts. And that wasn't easy. And there were days where I needed to shut it down and not I wasn't like forcing myself to be fully in pain or anything. And I also wasn't, yeah, I also wasn't pretending like I wasn't where I was. And I was letting myself feel that for however long it it needed to process out and really allow myself to meet myself in those things, really give myself permission of this is where I am right now. And it might be, that might look different for someone else, or someone might think this about my process, and needing to be okay with that, or needing to be able to say out loud, I know that other people might think this, and this is what's true for me. And then that would give me strength to let what's true for me be okay, to not need it to have to be on another person's timeline, or honestly, most of the time, an imagined thought process of someone else. Um, it really was such an invitation to grow that trust in myself in a million different ways. And I think that when I reflect on it is extremely powerful, and I'm very, very grateful for it. And I wouldn't have I wouldn't want myself to have gone through that. I wouldn't want another person to go through pain and challenge to learn these pieces, to integrate this wisdom. And I'm seeing that life is a multitude of things. It's seasons of things, it's cycles of things, it's different things at different times. And that's why I was also saying too, I'm not gonna fool myself to believe that now I'm just in this season of integration and all is an exhale. I've arrived. I am here now. I don't actually think that that's true. I I think what's happening more than anything is that that painful season created a version now of myself that just happens to know how to handle this pain and challenge differently. I have a different relationship with my nervous system. Which allows me to be able to be more grounded while also nervousness and anxiousness might arise. I know how to take good care of myself now in those moments. And that's also not to say that there are moments where it takes over in a way that I really need to take good care in a way that doesn't feel grounded to me, but feels like I'm taking good care of myself. And I think that is a beautiful thing to give ourselves. And so I think I'm just learning that life has seasons, life has flow, and also it's complex at all times, really. And so in the moments that feel more grounded and more joyful and the delightful feelings that we want to savor, let's savor those. Let's allow for that. And also know that when we're in moments of pain and challenge, there is still room for beauty to be had. We don't have to be swallowed whole. And in the days where we feel swallowed whole, can we be there for ourselves? Can we seek help and support when we just don't have it to give? Can we be there for each other in those ways? And when we have the ability, can we know that beauty and rest and joy and pleasure can all exist still, even if we're walking through challenges, even when pain arrives? Can there be room for the complexity of being a human? Can there be room for us to not have to shut completely down, if it's feeling like the descent? And sometimes it really is a full season of that. Like I really just walked through a full season of that. That didn't mean that there weren't delightful moments of life for a large part of it. So much of I was realizing like that there was like a painful internal process happening. And most of what I could list about my life was gratitude. Make that make sense. It was so interesting to me to really sit with that. And I had anger about that. And that to me was really fascinating to just say, oh yeah, I have this whole list that I can, I could list off for days things that I am grateful for, things that are beautiful about my life. And this descent process was still happening. And I couldn't deny both. Both things were true. And that was a powerful thing to sit with, a frustrating thing to sit with, but a powerful one. And I sit with it now today too, where I'm like, yes, that I love that both of those things are true. But in that moment, did not, I did not like that those were true. It felt really hard. What was congruent for me was that I was in pain and I wished that I wasn't. And I wished that that list of gratitude could include this being healed, could include not having to feel that way. And it's just interesting to me to realize that that wasn't a bad thing. That was me being really honest in that moment about where I was at. And um yeah, and not bypassing it just to need it or want it to be different. And how many times do we do that in life? Not just to ourselves, but to other people, to situations, to everything, where we're just like trying to make something different than what it is. What would happen if we what would happen if we met things as they are? And and what if, things don't remain stagnant in that way? What if things are evolving all the time? What if we're meeting a moment? We're meeting a version of ourselves. We're meeting just part of the story, part of a process. What would it look like to be with that discomfort, maybe that tension, that difference, and not need to change it, just be with it? And what could happen then? And what happens in the next moment when we continue to meet something and realize that there might be a shift or a change? What if we didn't assume that things just remained and or stayed stagnant or were immovable or unchangeable or stuck? And maybe they are, and maybe that's the honest part. And also, I think we get up to believing things remain stuck a lot more than we realize. And then it keeps us stuck, I think, whether that's about our own self, about someone else, about the way things are. I just think that there's more room to play here where we get to allow things to be more dynamic, allow things to be beautiful because they're different, allow things to evolve and grow and change, and allow ourselves to have different feelings about them, and also be with difference, be with discomfort, be with challenge, be with tension, be with surprise, even like a beautiful surprise. Because if we're believing that something's remaining or staying stuck, and I don't think remain is a inherently negative word. To remain is beautiful, right? Like we can choose to remain, and I think there's something really powerful about that. And yeah, when something feels like maybe it's feeling stuck or it's being stubborn or it's not moving in a way or time or fashion as we'd like it to. Um, yeah. Do we get stuck then on what we believe of that thing? Do we start to doubt our own self? Do we start to say, you know, berating things to ourselves about how we're stuck and all of these terrible things about what that means about us? Or do we start to believe that about another person and project and put things onto them and believe that they're stuck? Where do we do a disservice and create disconnection in relationships where, in those ways where we kind of like stunt an opportunity of growth, stunt the ability of someone else, even in our own mind, to be beautifully complex and multidimensional as a human being? Where do we stunt someone as a human being in our lives? Their own evolution, what's possible there. Yeah. I'm curious because I've witnessed it now over lots of time, but over this past year for sure in my own life where yeah, I have done that to myself. And then of course, if we're doing it to ourselves, there is something in that that feels like, oh, that's one that's if that's happening here, it it has the ability dangerously to happen externally too with other people. I may not know it consciously, but maybe subconsciously, there's a judgment there that comes in because I have a judgment about myself with that. And so then that judgment sneaks its way up onto another relationship of mine or thoughts on, you know, how the world at large is getting up to things. And in what ways does that disconnect me from actually relating in life, actually getting to know another person, actually getting to know myself better, actually getting to connect and grow and evolve? How does it stunt me? How does this stunt us potentially? So yeah, that's the question I'm living into and continuously living into. And I'm curious. I'm curious where it continues to take me. I like feeling like I spent time in the descent getting unstuck from a million different things, including my own limitations. It brought me here. It brought me to this microphone. It brought me to this episode. It brought me to this community. It brought me to work that I'm so proud to be doing right now in my life. It brought me to deepened relationships with myself, with my loved ones, with the world around me. It brought me to, yeah, a knowing of myself that feels really, really powerful because I'm able to actually have more groundedness to come from. Doesn't mean that relating isn't scary sometimes, or a lot of the time. It can be. There's so much vulnerability in relating. There's so much that we are putting on the line when we put ourselves out there, when we choose to relate. And when we have and continue to create a powerful, grounded relationship with ourselves, when we get to know ourselves well, when we regard ourselves actually, then we're coming from that place when we're relating. So if another person brings whatever they may bring to the table, there is like a solid relationship here that already exists that I'm bringing into that dynamic. I already have this relationship with myself. I do regard myself. That doesn't mean it doesn't wobble. That doesn't mean I don't get my feelings hurt. That doesn't mean that, I'm not anxious or nervous or any of those things that always tend to come up in dynamics of relating. What it does mean, though, is that I have myself. Even if hurt happens, I have myself. I'm there for myself. I actually really love the person that I am and I'm bringing to the table. I believe in that person. I know what her integrity is. I know what she's after. I know that she'll take responsibility when she misses the mark or messes up or is misunderstood and wants to make sure she's understood or lets it be, um, but is responsible to care deeply, is responsible to what matters to her, which is deep regard. Yeah, just deep, deep regard for self, other, world, this earth that we're on, all beings beyond what I know beings to be. I regard as like is the tenant here. That's what rehumanizing is all about. And it's beyond humans that I regard. Um, yeah, it's the biggest one. It's the biggest one for me. And if I'm coming from that place, I feel like what I've learned most deeply over the course of this invitation to get to know myself better is that I can come back to that. I can remember that. I can come from that. And yeah, I can keep coming back to that. I can trust myself that that's where that's coming from. And I can move from there. I don't need to be presenting perfectly. I don't need to have every word already planned out before I ever enter a room or a conversation or literally anything. I can just show up and be myself and let life unfold and live into it and trust myself to meet the moments as they happen. Trust that that's all that I'll ever need. And my God, does life feel whew, way more like an exhale. I know I was just talking about maybe life right now is not just a giant exhale, but sometimes, some moments it is. And for me, what I'm learning in this piece of self-trust and reconnection is it really does feel like an exhale when we don't have to hold and brace as if life needs to be looked that needs to look like something very specific, that untangling that perfectionism piece, like we need to, always like the hypervigilance, always being on guard, always needing to know what to do, almost like needing to have a speech written out before anything, before any social event, before any class you take, before any day at work, before anything, anything, anything. It's just interesting, like perfectionism is a performance and you don't even know it when you're doing it. And I think that that's the interesting thing. It feels like you just don't want to mess up, but in that is exhaustion. In that is this carefully curated everything. In that is deep, deep fear and panic and anxiousness and resentment eventually, and the ability to, yeah, it's like you don't have the ability to just relax. You don't have the ability to just be. And so you're always on and energy leaking no matter what situation you're in potentially. And what if we let that part go? And I don't just say that easily, right? This isn't a bypass. Like I was saying, the descent part was real. I didn't just quote unquote let it go. And now I feel grounded in situations where I typically would have felt like I needed to not mess anything up. Absolutely not. To let it go, quote unquote, always made me so frustrated. I'd be like, what does that even mean? How do I even begin to do that? And as I say it now, it's almost laughable. I'm like my previous versions of myself are just like eye rolling at me right now. But the let it go that I mean in this scenario, in this instance, it's not a just like you just do it. It's an it's a embodied understanding of letting it go, quote unquote. And I think it's less of just like a release and it's more of a learned pattern. To me, it's it's through the somatic work that I've been doing that has been remarkable. It's a million different things. It's not only somatics, but a huge part of it is. A huge part of it is getting to know those different parts of myself and having different relationships with parts of me that were bracing, but there's no possible way for those to have just let go of that job without me slowly but surely getting to know it. And then it slowly but surely started to release. I still have those pieces. I still am interacting with those. They need guidance by my adult self now. And it takes time. So it's not just a let it go and then it's good. It's a slow, like your hand slowly unfolding to release something. And I don't know the term for that, but I think it's, yeah, a slow, intentional, thoughtful, gentle relationship with what is really going on inside of you. Learning that, understanding that, having a relationship with that, and relating to self differently as you move forward to discover what's possible from here. And I remain doing that. And I'm continuing to live into this question, even in this integration phase, which, by the way, has its own discomforts and is fascinating because it's taking all those lessons from the descent and bringing them into spaces where I'm being activated, where I'm being triggered. And now it's like, okay, are we going to use the tools? How does that look? So it's not free from a lot of what happened or was coming up for me in that descent period. And also, it feels like I'm getting to do more with it. The descent felt a lot like the doing didn't feel productive, quote unquote. It felt like I wanted to do that, but that was more of a I just felt useless not being able to just like do something with what was happening. And it's interesting now to be able to have the do. It doesn't feel like a distraction or like I'm trying to um it's not coming from an anxious place like I need to, like a restless place. It feels more like an intentional, okay, what am I deciding now? Does that mean that I like being in that? No. And I really do like this relationship now that I am finding with how I'm interacting with myself in activated moments. I don't want to be activated. I like this moment right now where I'm not activated and I get to just share this. And I like that I'm honoring the fact that I can look back on moments that have felt uncomfortable recently and really be grateful for the tools I now have and continue to grow into to give myself in those moments because they come on random Tuesdays because you never know. And all we can do is continue to show up for ourselves, for one another. Yeah, and keep learning, keep growing, keep unlearning things that maybe need to be unlearned, or relate differently to things that maybe we don't need to use in the same way that we have in the past. I don't know. I think this is what living the questions really has looked like for me lately. And it feels really profound. I feel really proud of this journey. And it's exciting because who knows what question I'll live into later today or tomorrow or next week. It will be a flavor of this for sure. It will be this continued journey for sure. And I like that I feel more present for this experience. I feel like that's a lot of what I've been getting up to. And that feels really special to reflect on. I really love being in this moment. And I really want to savor the joy of what it feels like to be in this grounded moment. It's taken a lot to get to this day, to feel like this, to be in this spot. And am I absolutely everywhere that I want to be? No. And I'm really proud to be here. I'm really proud of what, if I were to go through what's congruent for me today in this moment, I feel very proud of that. No timeline that I want to collapse. And I'm going to savor that. Can we savor moments more? Can we let ourselves have those moments of being really proud, of reflecting in gratitude on the journey we've been on? And that gratitude doesn't necessarily have to be about the journey, because there can be a lot of painful things that happen that we're not grateful for. And can we be grateful for how we show up for ourselves, for each other in those moments that make all the difference? Yeah, I feel like that's just a massive takeaway for me today. So that's what I've got. That's what I've got for today's episode. Didn't know where that was going to go, and I love where it went. Look at that. And I'm walking out of this podcast feeling deep gratitude and a lot of pride for being on this journey and facing things that felt not so great, and right now feel very I don't know, they feel transmuted. I like at this moment, in this current stage, I feel like I just get to be with the beauty of what is, and the beauty of this future self I've let myself have. My current self is the future self I let myself have by facing really difficult things, even when I really didn't want to, not to force myself, but simply because I knew that was what I needed to do. It was the quote shorter road of sorts. I just believed that to be true. And you don't know that in the moment. It feels excruciatingly long a lot of the time. And I hope to come back to this episode and remind myself of these things when I do have a particularly ungrounded moment in the future, when I do need to remember that things really do, there are seasons of things. There are multiple things that can happen at one time too. And really beautiful grounding can happen when we trust ourselves, even in difficult moments, maybe even especially then. So thank you for being here for this journey of living into the episode, let alone the questions. And I so appreciate you being here. I so look forward to our next conversation. Because we did a special back-to-back guest episodes, we now have four solo episodes, although this is one of them. 4 solo episodes back-to-back, which will be very fun. So I will see you next week, per usual. But then the week after that, and the week after that, before we have our next guest on again. So we'll continue the conversation then. As always, thank you for being here, for the beauty of your hearts and curiosity. I would love to hear any thoughts that come up for you through this episode or through any episode. And I look forward to seeing you the next time.